A humble single-father janitor was forced to take his daughter to work, and what the millionaire woman CEO did next will leave you speechless. Just before we start, this community spans every continent. Drop your city's name if you feel comfortable sharing. The mop handle slipped from Mark Stevens' calloused hands as he heard the elevator chime on the 57th floor. It was 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday, and no one, absolutely no one, should have been arriving at the executive level of Blackwood Industries at this hour. "Daddy?" Emma's small voice whispered from behind the industrial cleaning cart, where he'd created a makeshift fort using fresh towels and his jacket. Her wide hazel eyes, so much like her late mother's, peeked out with concern. "Shh, sweetheart. Remember what I said?" Mark's heart hammered against his ribs as he quickly pushed the cart closer to the wall, trying to better conceal his 6-year-old daughter. "Stay very quiet and keep reading your book. Okay?" The elevator doors slid open with an expensive whisper, and out stepped Victoria Blackwood herself. Even at this ungodly hour, the 27-year-old CEO looked like she'd stepped from the pages of Fortune magazine, her charcoal blazer impeccable, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun that emphasized her sharp cheekbones and ice-blue eyes. Mark had been cleaning these offices for 3 years, but he'd only seen Ms. Blackwood a handful of times, always from a distance. The other janitors called her the Ice Queen, brilliant, ruthless, and utterly devoted to the empire her late father had built. She'd taken over at 24 and tripled the company's value. But at what the gossip mill suggested was a terrible personal cost. "Mr. She glanced at his name tag, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "Stevens, I wasn't aware we'd changed the cleaning schedule." "No, ma'am. Still the same schedule." Mark straightened, trying to position himself between her and the cart. "I'm just running a bit behind tonight." Her eyes, sharp as winter frost, scanned the area. Mark noticed she carried a leather portfolio and her phone, its screen illuminating her face with an eerie glow. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. She probably hadn't slept in days. "Behind," she repeated. Taking a step closer, her heels clicked against the marble floor like a countdown. "And yet I distinctly heard you speaking to someone." Mark's mouth went dry. His job, their health insurance, their tiny apartment in Queens, Emma's chance at staying in her school, it all flashed before his eyes. "I sometimes talk to myself while I work. Helps pass the time." Victoria's perfectly sculpted eyebrow arched. "Do you often refer to yourself as sweetheart?" Before Mark could respond, a small sneeze erupted from behind the cart. His heart stopped. Victoria's eyes immediately locked onto the sound source, and her expression shifted from suspicion to something unreadable. "Come out," she commanded, though her voice had lost some of its edge. Mark moved to protest, but Victoria raised a hand, silencing him. Slowly, Emma emerged from her hiding spot, clutching her worn copy of Charlotte's Web against her chest. Her light brown curls were mussed from her makeshift bed, and she wore pink pajamas decorated with tiny unicorns, a stark contrast to the corporate sterility surrounding them. "I'm sorry," Emma said in a voice barely above a whisper, her eyes filling with tears. "Daddy said I had to be invisible, but I couldn't help it. The cleaning stuff made my nose tickly." Victoria stood frozen, staring at the child with an expression Mark couldn't decode. For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of the air conditioning and the distant wail of a siren somewhere in the city below. "How old are you?" Victoria asked finally, her voice strangely soft. 6 3/4, Emma replied, lifting her chin with a touch of pride despite her tears. "I'll be 7 in January. And you're here because—" Mark stepped forward, placing a protective hand on Emma's shoulder. "My babysitter canceled last minute. My neighbor who usually helps is in the hospital. And I couldn't miss work. I need this job, Ms. Blackwood. We need it." He waited for the axe to fall, for her to pull out her phone and call security, or HR, or both. Instead, Victoria did something that shocked him to his core. She sat down. Right there on the marble floor, designer suit and all. She sat cross-legged in front of Emma. "Charlotte's Web," she observed, nodding at the book. "That's quite advanced reading for someone who's 6 3/4. Emma's fear began to melt away, replaced by enthusiasm. I've read it 3 times already. Mama used to read it to me before she went to heaven, and now I read it myself. Charlotte is very smart, like you probably are, running this whole big building. Emma, Mark warned gently, but Victoria held up a hand again. What makes you think Charlotte is smart? Victoria asked, and Mark could have sworn he saw the ghost of a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Well, Emma said, settling into what Mark recognized as her storytelling posture. She saves Wilbur even though everyone thinks she's just a spider. She uses her web to write messages, which is kind of like coding, Daddy says. He's teaching me about computers, and she's a good friend even when it's hard. Plus, she's a girl spider who's the hero, and that's important because sometimes people think only boy spiders can be heroes, which is silly. Victoria's expression cracked, revealing something raw and vulnerable underneath. You're learning coding? Mark cleared his throat. Just basics. Educational games, mostly. She picks things up quickly. Show me, Victoria said suddenly, standing and smoothing her skirt. She walked to her corner office, its glass walls offering a breathtaking view of Manhattan's glittering skyline. After a moment's hesitation, Mark took Emma's hand and followed. The office was a study in minimalist elegance, white walls, black furniture, a few carefully chosen pieces of modern art. But what caught Emma's attention was the bank of monitors on a side desk, displaying various charts and graphs. Whoa, Emma breathed. Is that real-time market data? Both adults turned to stare at her. Mark felt heat rise to his cheeks. She watches the financial news with me sometimes. Helps me practice English. Victoria moved to one of the computers and pulled up a simple coding program. Can you show me what you know? For the next 20 minutes, Mark watched in amazement as his daughter demonstrated basic loops and functions, her small fingers flying over the keyboard while Victoria occasionally offered guidance. The CEO's entire demeanor had transformed. The ice had melted, revealing someone who seemed almost human. She's exceptional, Victoria said quietly to Mark while Emma focused on solving a problem. Her logical processing, her vocabulary, her emotional intelligence. Have you had her tested? Mark's jaw tightened. We're doing fine. I'm not suggesting otherwise. Victoria's voice was careful, measured. But gifts like hers, they should be nurtured. There are programs, schools. That cost more than I make in a year, Mark interrupted. Then caught himself. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. Daddy, look, Emma exclaimed. I made it draw a spider web. Sure enough, on the screen was a geometric web pattern created through simple code. Victoria leaned in to examine it, and for a moment, her shoulder brushed against Emma's. The child looked up at her with pure delight. My mother used to say I was too smart for my own good, Victoria said suddenly, so quietly Mark almost missed it. She died when I was 8. Emma's face grew solemn. That's sad. My mama died when I was 4. But Daddy says she's still with us in our hearts. Yes, Victoria whispered. I suppose she is. The moment stretched between them. A janitor, a CEO, and a little girl who'd somehow bridged an impossible gap. Then Victoria's phone buzzed, shattering the spell. She glanced at it, and the mask slipped back into place. Tokyo markets, she explained unnecessarily. But she didn't move. We should go, Mark said, sensing the shift. Emma, help me gather your things. Wait. Victoria stood, walked to her desk, and pulled out a business card. She wrote something on the back and handed it to Mark. My direct line. If you ever find yourself without childcare again, call me. I'm here most nights anyway, and She paused, looking at Emma, who was carefully packing her book. She's welcome. Mark stared at the card like it might bite him. Ms. Blackwood, I don't think. It's not charity, she said sharply, then softened. Consider it. An investment in potential. Besides, this place could use some life after hours. As they prepared to leave, Emma tugged on Victoria's blazer. Ms. Blackwood, thank you for not being mad, and for teaching me about nested loops. Victoria crouched down to Emma's level. "Thank you for showing me your spider web. Charlotte would be proud." They left her standing there, silhouetted against the city lights, looking more alone than any person surrounded by such success had a right to be. As the elevator descended, Emma slipped her small hand into Mark's. "I like her," she announced. "She's sad, though, like how I was sad before you showed me that Mama's love stays with us." Mark squeezed her hand, thinking about the card in his pocket and the strange turn their lives had just taken. He'd come to work terrified of losing everything. Instead, something entirely unexpected had begun. But as they stepped out into the pre-dawn darkness of Manhattan, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that Victoria Blackwood's sudden interest in his daughter was more complicated than simple kindness. The way she'd looked at Emma, recognition, longing, and something that might have been fear, suggested this was far from over. "Daddy?" Emma asked as they walked toward the subway. "Do you think she'll really let me come back?" Mark looked up at the towering building behind them, at the single lit window on the 57th floor. "I don't know, sweetheart, I really don't know." But even as he said it, he knew with certainty that their lives had just taken a turn he couldn't yet understand. Victoria Blackwood didn't do anything without a reason, and whatever her reason for opening her door to them, Mark suspected it would change everything. The morning sun was just beginning to paint the sky purple and gold as they descended into the subway station. Emma yawned, leaning against him, still clutching her book. "Daddy?" she mumbled sleepily. "I think Ms. Victoria needs a friend, maybe even more than Wilbur needed Charlotte." Mark's throat tightened. From the mouths of babes, he thought. But as the train pulled into the station, he couldn't help but wonder, in this unlikely story, who would end up saving whom? 3 nights passed before Mark found himself standing outside Blackwood Industries again, Emma's small hand in his. This time it wasn't desperation that brought them here. It was the carefully worded text message he'd received that afternoon. "Board meeting running late. If you're working tonight, Emma is welcome to use the conference room on 56. Books and puzzles inside. VB." Mark had stared at his phone for a full minute, rereading the message. His supervisor, Carlos, had merely shrugged when asked about it. "Got an email from the top today. Says you're cleared to bring your kid if needed. Must be nice to have friends in high places, Stevens." Now, as they rode the service elevator up, Emma practically vibrated with excitement. She wore her good outfit, a purple sweater and jeans without holes, and carried a small backpack with her homework and books. "Remember the rules," Mark said for the 3rd time. "Stay in the conference room, don't touch anything expensive, and be invisible," Emma finished. "But Daddy, Ms. Victoria said I was welcome. That's the opposite of invisible." Before he could respond, the elevator opened on the 56th floor. Unlike the executive level above, this floor hummed with activity despite the late hour. Through glass walls, Mark could see Victoria in the main conference room, standing before a presentation screen, addressing a room full of stern-faced board members. She wore a black power suit tonight, her hair in its signature bun. But something was different. Her usual composure seemed frayed at the edges. Her hands, Mark noticed, trembled slightly as she clicked through slides showing profit projections. "This way, sweetheart." Mark guided Emma to a smaller conference room down the hall. True to Victoria's word, someone had prepared it. Children's books were stacked on the table, along with puzzles, coloring supplies, and a tablet loaded with educational games. A note card in Victoria's precise handwriting read, "Make yourself at home. V." "Wow," Emma breathed, immediately gravitating toward the books. She remembered I like Charlotte's Web. Look, there's more books about spiders. Mark set up Emma with her homework, unable to shake his unease. Why was Victoria Blackwood, the notorious Ice Queen, going out of her way for them? He'd Googled her after their first encounter, finding article after article about her meteoric rise, her father's sudden death, her reputation for crushing competitors. Nothing about her suggested she'd be the type to set up an impromptu children's library. "I'll be right outside if you need me," he told Emma, who was already absorbed in a book about tarantulas. Mark began his cleaning routine, but his eyes kept drifting to the main conference room. The meeting looked tense. One older man kept jabbing his finger at papers, his face red with apparent anger. Victoria stood her ground, but Mark could see the strain in her shoulders, the way she gripped the podium. He was emptying wastebaskets when the conference room door burst open. Board members filed out, their expressions ranging from frustrated to furious. The red-faced man paused near Mark, speaking loudly to a colleague. 27 years old and thinks she knows better than everyone. Her father would be rolling in his grave. This compassion project nonsense will tank our fourth quarter. They moved on, leaving Mark with more questions. Compassion project? Minutes later, Victoria emerged alone. She looked exhausted, defeat written in every line of her body. Her eyes met Mark's across the floor, widening slightly as if she'd forgotten he'd be there. "Ms. Blackwood," he started, but she waved him off. "Is Emma in the small conference room?" At his nod, she straightened her shoulders. "I should say hello." Mark followed, watching as Victoria knocked gently before entering. Emma looked up with a bright smile that seemed to physically impact the CEO. "Ms. Victoria, I finished my math homework. Do you want to check it? Daddy usually does, but you probably know math better since you run a whole company." To Mark's amazement, Victoria sat down beside Emma, reviewing her homework with genuine interest. "Very good. You carried the one perfectly here. Though in this problem, there's actually a faster way." For the next 20 minutes, Mark cleaned the surrounding offices while stealing glances at the unlikely pair. Victoria taught Emma mathematical shortcuts, her face more animated than he'd ever seen it. Emma, in turn, chattered about school, her favorite subjects, and her dream of becoming either a scientist or a writer, or maybe both, like Isaac Asimov. "You know Asimov?" Victoria's surprise was evident. "Daddy reads me his robot stories. I like the 3 laws. They're logical but also about being good, which is important." Victoria fell silent, studying Emma with that same unreadable expression from their first meeting. "My father used to read those to me," she said finally, before he decided fiction was a waste of time. The vulnerability in her voice made Mark pause in his work. Emma, with the emotional intuition children sometimes possess, reached out and patted Victoria's hand. "Maybe he was just scared," Emma offered. "Sometimes grown-ups get scared of things that make them feel too much." Victoria stared at the small hand on hers. "That's very perceptive." "Ms. Johnson says I'm perceptive. That's my counselor at school. I see her because sometimes I get sad about Mama, and that's okay." "Your counselor sounds wise," Victoria said softly. She glanced at Mark, who'd given up pretending to work, and stood in the doorway. "Your daughter is remarkable, Mr. Stevens." "I know," he said simply, "though I can't take much credit. She's been this way since she could talk." Victoria stood, smoothing her skirt. "I should let you both get back to your evening. But—" She hesitated, then pulled out her phone. "There's a STEM program for gifted children at the Natural History Museum. Saturdays. I have a contact there who owes me a favor. If you're interested—" Mark's pride warred with his desire to give Emma every opportunity. "We'll think about it." "Of course." Victoria moved toward the door, then turned back. "Emma, what did you mean earlier about grown-ups being scared of feeling too much?" Emma looked up from her book, considering the question with 6-year-old seriousness. "Well, when Daddy first told me about Mama going to heaven, he tried not to cry. But I told him it's okay to cry because tears mean love has nowhere else to go. Maybe some grown-ups forget that feeling. Things means you're alive." The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria's carefully constructed mask cracked completely, and for a moment Mark saw raw pain flash across her features. Then, without a word, she fled. "Did I say something wrong?" Emma asked, worried. Mark pulled his daughter into a hug. "No, sweetheart. I think you said exactly what she needed to hear." They finished their evening quietly. Mark completed his rounds while Emma read, occasionally sharing interesting spider facts. But his mind kept returning to Victoria's reaction, to the board members' angry words about a compassion project. As they prepared to leave, Mark noticed Victoria's office light was still on. Through the glass, he could see her at her desk, No longer the composed CEO, but a young woman staring blankly at her computer screen. "Wait here," he told Emma, then knocked on Victoria's door. "Come in," she called, her voice professional again. Mark entered cautiously. "We're heading out. I wanted to thank you for accommodating Emma again." "It's no trouble." She didn't look up from her screen. "Did she enjoy the books?" "Very much." He hesitated, then plunged ahead. "Ms. Blackwood, is everything all right? That meeting seemed challenging." She laughed bitterly. "That's one word for it. When you try to implement programs that prioritize employee well-being over profit margins, the board tends to revolt." "The Compassion Project?" Her eyes snapped to his, sharp with surprise. "You heard that?" "Hard not to." Guy was pretty loud. Victoria leaned back in her chair, suddenly looking far younger than 27. "My father built this company on the principle of maximum profit at any cost. I'm trying to prove you can be successful and still treat people like humans." "The board disagrees." "That's admirable," Mark said carefully. "Is it? Or is it naive?" She rubbed her temples. "Sometimes I think they're right. That I'm too young, too idealistic. That I'm trying to fix something in the company because I couldn't fix—" She stopped abruptly. "Fix what?" Mark asked gently. "Nothing. I'm sorry, I shouldn't be." She straightened, rebuilding her walls. "You should get Emma home. It's late." Mark recognized dismissal but couldn't leave without saying one thing. "Ms. Blackwood, I've worked here 3 years. I've seen how employees were treated before and after you took over. The health insurance improvements, the daycare subsidy program, the mental health resources, those aren't naive. They're human." She looked at him then, really looked at him. "Your wife," she said suddenly. "Emma mentioned she passed 2 years ago. Cancer?" Mark's throat tightened. "Car accident. Drunk driver. I'm sorry. Thank you, it was, hard, but Emma keeps me going. She's everything good about her mother and then some. She's lucky to have you," Victoria said softly. "Not all fathers." She trailed off again. "Well," Mark said after a moment, "we'll see you around." "Actually," Victoria pulled out a folder from her desk. "This is the information about the STEM program. No obligations, but look it over." Mark took the folder. "We will." As he turned to leave, Victoria called out, "Mr. Stevens, what Emma said about tears meaning love has nowhere to go. Did she come up with that herself?" "She did," Mark confirmed. "Right after the funeral. She's got an old soul, my Emma." Victoria nodded slowly. "An old soul," she repeated. "Yes, I think you're right." Walking back to collect Emma, Mark found his daughter had cleaned up the conference room, leaving everything exactly as she'd found it except for a picture she'd drawn and left on the table. It showed 3 figures, a tall man, a small girl, and a woman with dark hair, standing together under a spiderweb that formed a protective canopy over them. At the bottom, in careful letters, she'd written, "For Ms. Victoria, from Emma. P.S. Charlotte says hi." "Should we leave it?" Emma asked. "I think she'd like that," Mark said, though he wondered what Victoria would make of being drawn into their little family portrait. As they rode the elevator down, Emma yawned. "Daddy? I think Ms. Victoria is like Wilbur at the beginning of the book. She thinks she's alone, but she's not. She just hasn't met her Charlotte yet." "Maybe not," Mark agreed, though privately he wondered if Emma herself might be playing the role of Charlotte, weaving connections where none had existed before, saving someone who didn't even know they needed saving. The night air was crisp as they exited the building. Looking back, Mark saw Victoria's silhouette in her office window. She was holding Emma's drawing, her shoulders shaking in what might have been laughter or tears. "Come on, little spider," he told Emma. "Time to get you to bed." But as they walked to the subway, the folder about the STEM program tucked under his arm, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that their lives were becoming entangled with Victoria Blackwood's in ways that went far beyond a simple act of kindness. Emma, with her startling wisdom and open heart, had seen through the CEO's armor to the wounded soul beneath. The question was, What would Victoria do now that she'd been seen? As if in answer to his thoughts, his phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. Thank Emma for the picture. Tell her Charlotte says hi back. V. Mark smiled despite himself. Maybe Emma was right. Maybe Victoria Blackwood, the ice queen of Manhattan's corporate world, just needed a friend. And maybe, just maybe, they all needed each other more than any of them realized. But even as warmth spread through his chest at the thought, a voice in the back of his mind warned that getting close to someone as powerful and damaged as Victoria Blackwood came with risks. He'd already lost one woman he loved. Could he risk Emma getting attached to someone who might disappear from their lives as suddenly as she'd entered? Only time would tell. But for now, he had a sleepy 6-year-old to get home and a folder about opportunities he'd never imagined possible for his daughter. Life, Mark reflected as they descended into the subway station, had a funny way of putting you exactly where you needed to be, even if that place was a luxury office building at 2 a.m., with a mop in one hand and hope in the other. Saturday arrived gray and drizzling, matching Mark's anxious mood as he stood with Emma outside the Natural History Museum. She bounced on her toes, utterly unconcerned by the weather, clutching the acceptance letter for the STEM program trial session. Do you think there'll be other kids like me? She asked for the 10th time. Kids who like spiders and robots and asking lots of questions? I'm sure there will be. Sweetheart. Mark adjusted her rain jacket, trying to quiet his own doubts. The other families entering the museum looked like they'd stepped from a different world. Designer clothes, casual mentions of vacation homes, children comparing notes on their private tutors. Mr. Stevens? Mark turned to find Victoria approaching under a black umbrella. She wore jeans and a sweater, the most casual he'd ever seen her, yet still managed to look like she'd walked off a magazine cover. Ms. Blackwood, I didn't expect. I mentioned I had a contact here. Thought I'd make the introduction personally. She knelt to Emma's level. Ready for your adventure? Emma beamed. I read 3 more books about spiders this week. Did you know some tarantulas can live for 30 years? I didn't, Victoria admitted, and Mark caught what might have been a genuine smile. Shall we go learn more? Inside, Victoria led them through marble halls to a classroom where about 15 children were already gathered. The instructor, Dr. Sarah Chen, greeted Victoria warmly. Victoria, so this is the brilliant Emma you told me about. Dr. Chen shook Emma's hand seriously. We're going to be studying biomimicry today, how scientists copy nature to solve problems. Perfect for someone who loves spiders. As Emma eagerly joined the other children, Mark pulled Victoria aside. You didn't have to come. I wanted to. She watched Emma interact with the other kids, her expression thoughtful. I was in this program once, 20 years ago. My mother brought me. She shook her head. Anyway, I thought you might appreciate a familiar face. They settled in the parent observation area. Mark noticed the other parents glancing at Victoria with recognition and curiosity. She seemed oblivious, her attention fixed on Emma, who was already raising her hand to answer questions. She's fearless, Victoria murmured. I was terrified my first day, convinced the other kids would realize I didn't belong. You? Terrified. Mark couldn't hide his surprise. Hard to believe, I know. Her laugh was self-deprecating. My father had just started making real money. We'd moved from Queens to the Upper East Side, and suddenly I was surrounded by kids who'd been wealthy since birth. I felt like a fraud. Mark studied her profile. Emma mentioned you're from Queens originally. We're in Astoria. Astoria, Victoria repeated softly. We lived there until I was 7. Small apartment above a bodega. My mother worked 2 jobs while my father built his first company in our living room. Her voice grew distant. She died the year we moved. Heart condition nobody knew about. One day she was helping me with homework. The next, I'm sorry, Mark said, understanding dawning. Emma was 6, almost 7. The same age Victoria had been when her world shattered. My father threw himself into work after that. Built his empire, gave me everything except... She stopped, seeming to remember who she was talking to. I apologize, you don't need to hear this. Sometimes it helps to talk, Mark offered. especially to someone who understands loss. Victoria turned to him then, really looking at him for the first time. Not as the CEO to the janitor, but as two people who'd survived the unsurvivable. "How do you do it?" she asked. "Raise Emma alone? Keep her so untouched by grief?" Mark considered the question. Through the window, Emma was building something with blocks, collaborating with a boy her age, both of them laughing. "I don't shield her from grief," he said finally. "We talk about her mother all the time. Look at photos, share stories. The grief is there, but so is the love. They exist together." He paused. "Emma taught me that, actually. She processes emotions like someone 3 times her age. The tears meaning love has nowhere to go," Victoria quoted softly. "Exactly. She came up with that at 4 years old. Sometimes I think she's the one raising me." They watched in comfortable silence as the class progressed. Emma threw herself into every activity with enthusiasm, her hand shooting up with questions that made Dr. Chen's eyes widen with impressed surprise. "There's something I should tell you," Victoria said suddenly. "The program is expensive, prohibitively so, but they have sponsorships available. Full rides for exceptional students." Mark's jaw tightened. "Ms. Blackwood, the sponsorship is anonymous," she continued. "The family never knows who's funding it. It could be anyone, a corporation, a wealthy donor, the museum itself." She kept her eyes fixed on Emma. "All they see is that their child was selected based on merit." "And Emma was selected based on merit?" Dr. Chen reviewed her test scores, the sample work you submitted. "She's genuinely excited to have Emma in the program." Victoria finally met his eyes. "The sponsorship just removes the financial barrier." Mark wrestled with his pride. "Why?" he asked bluntly. "Why are you doing this?" Victoria was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. "My mother died before she could see what I'd become. But when she was alive, she used to tell me that success meant nothing if you didn't lift others as you climbed." She smiled sadly. "I've been very successful, Mr. Stevens, but I haven't done much lifting. The Compassion Project is failing." The admission seemed to pain her. "The board votes next week. They'll kill it, redistribute the funds to shareholder dividends. They're probably right. I'm too young, too idealistic." "You're trying to honor your mother," Mark interrupted. "That's not idealistic. That's human." Victoria's eyes widened, then grew bright with unshed tears. Thank you." Through the window, Emma had moved to a microscope station, examining spider silk samples. Her face glowed with wonder as Dr. Chen explained the properties that made spider silk stronger than steel. "Can I ask you something?" Victoria said. "How did you meet Emma's mother?" Mark smiled at the memory. "College library, finals week. She was studying biochemistry. I was in computer science. I accidentally knocked over her tower of books. She said if I helped her reorganize them, she'd help me with my calculus. We spent the next 12 hours talking about everything except schoolwork." "Love at first sight?" "Love at first conversation," Mark corrected. Sarah had this way of seeing the world, finding wonder in everything. Emma has that same gift. He glanced at Victoria. "You had someone like that once." "Your mother." "Yes," Victoria whispered. "I did." The class began wrapping up. Emma bounced over to them, eyes sparkling. "Did you see? I got to look at actual spider silk under the microscope. It has these tiny proteins that make it stretchy and strong, and Dr. Chen says next week we'll learn about how scientists are trying to copy it to make better materials and breathe." "Sweetheart," Mark laughed, but his heart swelled with pride. "Did you like it?" Victoria asked. Emma nodded enthusiastically, then grew serious. "Thank you for telling me about this place. Some of the kids have been coming for years and know everything already, but they were nice and showed me things." "I'm glad," Victoria said softly. "Learning is better with friends." As they prepared to leave, Dr. Chen pulled Mark aside. "Your daughter is exceptional, Mr. Stevens. Not just her intelligence, though that's remarkable, but her emotional intelligence, her creativity, her collaborative spirit. With the right nurturing, she could go far." "We'll do our best," Mark said, very aware of Victoria listening nearby. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean. Emma walked between them, chattering about her favorite parts of the class. As they reached the subway entrance, Victoria hesitated. "What are your plans for the rest of the day?" Mark shrugged. "Grocery shopping, laundry, glamorous Saturday stuff." "There's a butterfly conservatory in the park," Victoria said, not quite meeting his eyes. "I haven't been in years, but I remember they have an exhibit on spider habitats. If Emma's interested." Emma's gasp was answer enough. She looked up at Mark with pleading eyes. "I don't want to impose on your weekend," Mark started, but Victoria shook her head. "You wouldn't be. I usually spend Saturdays in the office. This would be—" She searched for words. "Different. Good, different." And so Mark found himself spending the afternoon in Central Park with his daughter and one of New York's most powerful CEOs. Victoria shed her corporate armor layer by layer as Emma drew her into increasingly animated discussions about insects, science, and life. At the butterfly conservatory, Emma stood transfixed as butterflies landed on her outstretched hands. Victoria watched with an expression of wonder that matched Emma's, as if she too were seeing magic for the first time in years. "My mother brought me here once," Victoria said quietly to Mark. "I must have been Emma's age. I remember thinking the butterflies were like flying flowers." She smiled at the memory. "I tried to bring one home. Mom had to explain why they needed to stay in their special garden." "You wanted to keep beauty close," Mark observed. "Nothing wrong with that." "Except when you cage it," Victoria replied. "Then it stops being beautiful." Mark thought about that as he watched Emma gently encourage a monarch butterfly to climb onto Victoria's hand. The CEO stood perfectly still, barely breathing as if afraid to disturb the moment. "See?" Emma whispered. "If you're very calm and patient, they trust you." "Trust," Victoria repeated, watching the butterfly flex its orange and black wings. Such a fragile thing. The butterfly flew away, but Victoria remained still, looking at her hand as if she could still feel its tiny weight. "Ms. Victoria?" Emma tugged on her sleeve. "Do you want to see the spider exhibit now?" They spent another hour exploring, Emma alternating between teaching Victoria spider facts and asking increasingly complex questions about business, science, and why grown-ups made things so complicated. "Because we forget," Victoria answered one such question. "We forget that the simplest solution is often the best one." As the afternoon wore on, Mark noticed the change in Victoria. The tension in her shoulders eased. Her smiles came more frequently. She laughed, actually laughed, when Emma attempted to demonstrate a spider's mating dance she'd read about. "You're different with her," Mark observed while Emma was engrossed in reading an information panel. "She makes it easy to remember," Victoria said simply. "Who I was before I became who I'm supposed to be." They parted ways as the sun began to set. Emma hugged Victoria goodbye, a gesture that clearly startled the CEO. "Thank you for the butterfly garden and the spider exhibit and for listening to all my questions, even the silly ones," Emma said in one breath. "None of your questions are silly," Victoria assured her. "And thank you for sharing your Saturday with me." As they watched her walk away, Emma slipped her hand into Mark's. "She smiled more today." "Yes, she did." "That's good. Smiles are like butterflies, they make everything more beautiful." Emma yawned. "Can we invite her to do things with us again?" Mark thought about the risks, the complications, the vast gulf between their worlds. Then he thought about the joy on Victoria's face when the butterfly landed on her hand. The way she'd listened to Emma with complete attention, the loneliness that radiated from her even in a crowded room. "We'll see, sweetheart. We'll see." But he already knew the answer. Emma had a gift for seeing people who needed saving, even when they didn't know it themselves. And Victoria Blackwood, for all her power and success, needed saving as much as any lost soul Emma had ever found. The question was whether Victoria would let herself be saved, or whether the weight of her past and the demands of her present would prove too strong for even Emma's magic to overcome. As they rode the subway home, Emma curled against his side. Mark thought about butterflies and spider silk, about strength that came from flexibility and beauty that couldn't be caged. He thought about Victoria's mother, who died too soon, and his Sarah, taken in an instant. Most of all, he thought about the unexpected ways life wove people together, creating connections stronger than any spider's web and more delicate than butterfly wings. They'd have to be careful. But then again, the best things in life usually required a leap of faith. "Daddy?" Emma murmured sleepily. "I think Miss Victoria is going to be important." "Why's that, baby?" "Because Charlotte always knows when someone needs her web. And I'm Charlotte, remember?" Mark smiled into his daughter's hair. "Yes, sweetheart. You're definitely Charlotte." The following Thursday arrived with an unexpected storm that mirrored the tempest in Victoria's boardroom. Mark could hear the shouting from the hallway as he prepared his cleaning supplies. The words reckless and irresponsible cutting through the executive floor's usual silence. "Daddy, why are they so angry?" Emma whispered from her spot in the small conference room. She'd been coming with him more frequently, Victoria's standing invitation removing the constant stress of finding childcare. "Sometimes grown-ups disagree about important things," Mark explained, though he suspected this was more than a simple disagreement. Through the glass walls, he could see Victoria standing alone against 12 board members, her spine straight, but her face pale. Papers were scattered across the conference table, what looked like financial projections and employee satisfaction surveys. "Motion to terminate the Compassion Project initiatives and redirect funds to quarterly dividends," the red-faced man from before announced. "All in favor?" 11 hands rose. Victoria's remained flat on the table. "Motion carried," someone said with satisfaction. "Now about your leadership," Victoria's voice cut through, sharp as winter ice. "If you want my resignation, have the courage to ask for it directly." The room fell silent. Mark realized he was holding his breath. "We're not asking for your resignation," an older woman said carefully. "But perhaps it's time to consider bringing in a senior advisor, someone with more experience." "Someone who thinks like my father, you mean?" Victoria's laugh was bitter. "Someone who'll put profit over people, who'll cut benefits and outsource jobs and turn this company back into the soulless machine it was becoming. Your father built an empire. My father built a monument to his own ego." Victoria's composure finally cracked. He was so focused on conquering the business world that he forgot he had a daughter who needed him. He died at his desk, alone, having pushed away everyone who ever loved him. Is that the legacy we want to continue? The silence that followed was deafening. Mark saw several board members shift uncomfortably. "The vote has been taken," the red-faced man said firmly. "The Compassion Project is dead. Accept it gracefully, Victoria, or—" The lights suddenly went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a second later, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. In the confusion, Mark heard a small voice. "Daddy?" His heart stopped. Emma stood in the doorway of the conference room, her eyes wide with fear. The storm must have knocked out power to the building. "It's okay, sweetheart. Just a power outage." He started toward her, but she was already moving, drawn by the distress she could sense even through the glass walls. "Emma, wait!" But his daughter had already pushed open the boardroom door. 12 pairs of eyes turned to stare at the small girl in unicorn pajamas who'd interrupted their corporate coup. "I'm sorry," Emma said, her voice trembling. "I got scared when the lights went out, but then I heard you all shouting and that made me more scared because when grown-ups shout it means something's really wrong." "Who is this child?" the red-faced man demanded. "Security should—" "She's with me," Victoria said quietly. "Emma, it's all right. The lights will come back on soon." But Emma wasn't looking at the lights. She was studying the faces around the table with that unnervingly perceptive gaze of hers. "You're all mad at Ms. Victoria because she wants to help people?" "It's more complicated than that," one of the board members started. "Is it?" Emma tilted her head. "My daddy says Ms. Victoria made it so he has good insurance and can take care of me. And she made a place where employees' kids can stay while their parents work. That doesn't sound complicated. It sounds nice." "Nice doesn't pay dividends," someone muttered. Emma's face scrunched in concentration. "What are dividends?" "Money for people who own parts of the company," Victoria explained softly. "Oh." Emma processed this. "So you all want more money instead of helping people like my daddy?" The uncomfortable silence stretched. Mark finally reached Emma, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. "I'm so sorry, Ms. Blackwood. We'll go." "No," Victoria said suddenly. "Let her stay. After all, she's exactly who this affects. The daughter of an employee, the future we're supposedly building for." She looked around the table. "Can any of you look her in the eye and explain why her father's health care should be cut so your portfolios can grow by 2%? This is highly inappropriate," the red-faced man blustered. "Using a child to—" "I'm not using anyone," Victoria interrupted. "But maybe we all need reminding that our decisions affect real people. People like Mark, who works nights to support his daughter alone. People like Emma, who's brilliant and kind and deserves every opportunity to succeed." The lights flickered back on. In the harsh fluorescent glare, Mark could see the calculation in the board members' eyes shifting. Emma, seemingly oblivious to the tension, had noticed the papers on the table. "Are those graphs? I love graphs." She peered at one showing employee satisfaction scores. "Look, this line goes up. That means people are happier, right?" "Yes," Victoria said, a small smile playing at her lips. "It does." "And this one?" Emma studied another chart. "Oh, this shows kids in the company daycare. There are so many. Do they all have parents who work here?" "They do," Victoria confirmed. "That's like a big family," Emma announced. "My teacher says families take care of each other. Is that what you're trying to do, Miss Victoria? Make the company like a big family?" Several board members exchanged glances. The older woman who'd suggested a senior advisor cleared her throat. "Perhaps we should table the leadership discussion for now." "I agree," another member said quickly. "The Compassion Project vote stands, but let's revisit the budget allocations next quarter, see if there's a middle ground." The red-faced man looked ready to explode, but he was suddenly outnumbered. One by one, the board members filed out, several pausing to look at Emma with expressions ranging from curiosity to shame. When they were alone, Victoria sank into a chair, her professional mask finally falling completely. "Thank you," she whispered to Emma. "You said what I've been trying to say for months." "I just told the truth," Emma said simply. "Daddy says the truth is always the right thing, even when it's hard." Mark found his voice. "Emma, you can't just walk into important meetings." "She saved me," Victoria interrupted. "They were going to call for my resignation. Maybe not today, but soon." She looked at Emma with wonder. "How did you know exactly what to say?" Emma shrugged. "They reminded me of the mean kids at school who don't want to share toys. Sometimes you have to remind them that sharing makes everyone happier." Victoria laughed, a real, genuine laugh that transformed her face. "Out of the mouths of babes." She stood, composing herself. "Mark, I owe you an apology. I've been using your daughter as, I don't know, a reminder of who I used to be. That's not fair to either of you." "You've been kind to us," Mark said carefully. "That's nothing to apologize for." "Kind," Victoria repeated. "My father would say kindness is weakness." "Your father was wrong," Emma piped up. "Kindness is the strongest thing there is. It's like spider silk, invisible but super strong." Victoria knelt to Emma's level. "You really are extraordinary, you know that?" "I'm just me," Emma said. "But you're extraordinary too. You stood up to all those angry people to help families like ours. That's brave." Mark watched something shift in Victoria's expression. A wall crumbling, perhaps, or a decision being made. "Emma," Victoria said slowly, "would you and your father like to have dinner? Not in the office, but somewhere normal? I realize I don't know much about your lives outside these walls." Emma looked to Mark, excitement bright in her eyes. He weighed the invitation, the complications it might bring. But then he thought about Victoria standing alone against 12 board members, fighting for people like them. "We'd like that," he said. They ended up at a small Italian restaurant in Queens that Mark and Emma loved. Victoria seemed out of place at first in the cozy, family-run establishment, but Emma's chatter soon had her relaxing. "This is where Daddy brought me after my first day of kindergarten," Emma explained, twirling spaghetti expertly. "I was scared nobody would like me, but then I made 3 friends and we built the tallest block tower in the class. Were you scared on your first day of school? Emma asked Victoria. Terrified, Victoria admitted. I was so worried about saying the wrong thing that I didn't speak at all. The teacher thought I didn't know English. But you found your voice, Emma observed. Just like today. Sometimes it just takes time to be brave. As they ate, Mark found himself seeing Victoria not as the intimidating CEO, but as a young woman who'd lost her way and was trying to find it again. She asked about their life, their routines, their dreams. When Emma excitedly described her favorite books, Victoria listened with genuine interest. You know, Victoria said as Emma devoured a bowl of gelato, there's a children's science museum opening next month. They're looking for young ambassadors to help with the spider exhibit. I could put in a word. Could I really? Emma bounced in her seat. I know so much about spiders now. I could teach other kids. I think you'd be perfect, Victoria said, then glanced at Mark. If your father approves, of course. We'll see, Mark said, but his smile gave away his answer. As they prepared to leave, Emma hugged Victoria goodbye, a gesture that was becoming routine but still seemed to catch the CEO off guard. Thank you for dinner and for being brave today, Emma said. And don't worry about those mean bored people. Daddy says the right thing isn't always the easy thing, but it's always worth it. Victoria's eyes grew bright. Your daddy's very wise. He is, Emma agreed. But you're wise too. You just forget sometimes because you're sad. The words hung in the air. Victoria looked stricken, vulnerable in a way Mark had never seen. Emma, he warned gently. It's okay, Victoria said softly. She's right, I am sad. I've been sad for a very long time. Emma took Victoria's hand. That's okay. Sad doesn't last forever. My counselor says feelings are like weather, they come and go. Even the biggest storms end eventually. Victoria squeezed Emma's small hand. What did I do to deserve you in my life? You needed us, Emma said simply. And we needed you too. That's how friendship works. On the subway ride home, Emma curled against Mark's side, exhausted from the evening's excitement. Daddy, is it okay that I told those bored people the truth? You did the right thing, baby. Though next time, maybe wait for an invitation before joining a board meeting. Emma giggled. They looked so surprised. But I think some of them remembered they have hearts. What about Victoria? What do you think of her? Emma was quiet for a moment. She's like a butterfly stuck in a chrysalis. She wants to come out and be beautiful. But she's scared. Maybe we can help her not be scared anymore. Mark pressed a kiss to his daughter's head. Maybe we can. But as the train rumbled through the tunnels, he wondered what would happen when Victoria fully emerged from her chrysalis. Would she fly away, leaving them behind? Or would she stay, adding her colors to their small but vibrant world? Time would tell. But for tonight, they'd shared spaghetti and laughter with one of the most powerful women in New York. And she'd seemed genuinely happy. Emma had a gift for bringing light to dark places, and Victoria Blackwood's life had been dark for far too long. The storm outside had passed, leaving the city washed clean. Inside, Mark felt the stirrings of something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in 2 years. Not quite hope. Not quite love, but the possibility of both. It terrified him. But as Emma would say, sometimes being scared just meant something important was happening. And Victoria Blackwood, with all her complications and sadness, was becoming important. The question was, would she let herself believe they could be important to her too? 3 weeks later, Mark stood in his apartment adjusting his tie for the 5th time. It was the only one he owned, purchased for job interviews and worn to Sarah's funeral. Now it felt strange against his throat, a reminder that he was about to enter a world where he decidedly didn't belong. Daddy, you look handsome, Emma declared from the doorway. She wore her favorite dress, purple with silver stars, and had insisted on doing her own hair, resulting in a lopsided but endearing ponytail. You sure about this, baby? Ms. Victoria needs us there, Emma said with 6-year-old certainty. She said it's the most important night of her year. The invitation had arrived by courier a week ago. Elegant cream cardstock requesting their presence at the Blackwood Industries annual gala. Victoria's handwritten note was simple. Please come. I could use some friendly faces. V. Mark had almost declined. What business did a janitor and his daughter have at a black-tie charity event? But Emma had been so excited, and truth be told, he was curious about Victoria's world beyond the office walls. A car waited outside. Victoria had insisted, knowing they'd never find the venue on their own. The driver, an older gentleman named Henry, smiled warmly at Emma. "Miss Victoria mentioned you'd be joining us tonight," he said. "She's quite looking forward to it." The gala was held at the Rainbow Room, 65 floors above Manhattan. As they ascended in the elevator, Mark's stomach churned with nerves. Through the doors, he could hear the sound of an orchestra, the clink of champagne glasses, the murmur of New York's elite. "Remember," he told Emma, "best behavior. These are important people." "Important like us?" Emma asked innocently. Before he could answer, the doors opened and they stepped into another world. The room sparkled with crystal chandeliers and floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the city's glittering skyline. Women in designer gowns glided past men in tuxedos that probably cost more than Mark made in a month. Everyone seemed to know exactly where to go, what to say, how to belong. "Mark!" He turned to find Victoria approaching, and his breath caught. She wore a midnight blue gown that made her eyes seem impossibly bright. Her hair, usually confined to its strict bun, cascaded over her shoulders in soft waves. She looked young, beautiful, and utterly out of place despite this being her event. "You came," she said, relief evident in her voice. "We promised," Emma said, then gasped. "Miss Victoria, you look like a princess." "So do you," Victoria said, crouching carefully in her gown. "I love your stars, very appropriate for being so high in the sky." "Miss Blackwood." A man appeared at her elbow, tall, handsome in that old money way, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You can't spend all evening hiding with whoever these people are." Victoria's jaw tightened. "Richard, this is Mark Stevens and his daughter Emma. They're my guests. Mark, Emma, this is Richard Hartwell. His family's company partners with ours." Richard's gaze swept over them dismissively. "How charitable of you, Victoria. Though I thought this year's cause was the children's hospital, not—" He gestured vaguely at their obvious middle-class appearance. "Careful, Richard." Victoria's voice could have frozen fire. "Your breeding is showing." He laughed, the sound sharp as breaking glass. "Always so defensive. Your father never let emotion cloud his judgment. Perhaps that's why the board is considering alternatives." "Is that a threat?" "An observation." He leaned closer to Victoria, deliberately excluding Mark and Emma. "Dance with me. Show them you're not completely lost to your bleeding heart phase." Ms. Victoria promised to show me the chocolate fountain," Emma interrupted, taking Victoria's hand. "And Daddy's a really good dancer. Mama taught him, so you don't need to worry about her dancing." Richard stared at Emma as if she'd spoken in tongues. Victoria used his momentary confusion to step away. "If you'll excuse us, Richard, I have promises to keep." She led them away, her hand trembling slightly in Emma's grip. Once they were out of earshot, she exhaled shakily. "I apologize. Richard is, well, he's everything my father wanted me to marry. Old money, old values, old ways of thinking." "You don't have to apologize," Mark said. "We shouldn't have—" "Don't!" Victoria's voice was fierce. "Don't let him make you feel like you don't belong. You're worth 10 of him." They found a quieter corner where Emma could indeed marvel at an elaborate chocolate fountain. As she carefully dipped strawberries, Victoria pointed out various attendees, sharing surprisingly funny observations about New York's elite. "That's Margaret Ashford. She's donated millions to animal welfare, but is terrified of her own poodle. And there's James Chen, brilliant investor. Can't remember his own children's names without his assistant's help. They all seem—" Mark searched for a diplomatic word. "Exhausting?" Victoria supplied. "They are. I've been performing for people like them since I was 12. She watched Emma chat with a waiter who'd brought her extra strawberries. "I'd forgotten what it was like to just be real." "Is that why you invited us? To be your dose of reality?" Victoria turned to him, and for a moment the mask slipped entirely. I invited you because you're the only people in my life who see me as Victoria, not as a Blackwood or a CEO or a merger opportunity. Is that selfish? Human, Mark corrected. Though I'm not sure we fit in your world. Maybe that's what my world needs. People who don't fit. She smiled as Emma returned, chocolate smearing her chin. Having fun? The waiter said I ask better questions than the reporters, Emma announced proudly. I asked him about the chocolate fountain engineering. Of course you did. Victoria produced a napkin, gently cleaning Emma's face. The gesture was so naturally maternal that it made Mark's chest tight. Victoria, an older woman approached, elegant, silver-haired, with eyes that missed nothing. I've been looking for you. The auction is about to... She stopped, noticing Mark and Emma. I wasn't aware you'd brought personal guests. Grandmother. This is Mark Stevens and his daughter Emma. Mark works at Blackwood Industries. Emma is in the STEM program I've been funding. The grandmother, the legendary Eleanor Blackwood, Mark realized, studied them with sharp interest. Stevens, you're the janitor. Yes, ma'am. The one whose daughter interrupted a board meeting. Emma shifted nervously. I'm sorry if I caused trouble. Eleanor's stern expression cracked slightly. On the contrary, child. You accomplished what I've been trying to do for years. Made those fossils think about something other than their portfolios. She looked at Victoria. Your father would be apoplectic. Yes, Victoria agreed quietly. He would. Good. Eleanor's smile was sharp as a blade. He was a brilliant man, but he forgot that companies are made of people, not numbers. Don't make his mistakes, Victoria. She swept away, leaving them in stunned silence. Did your grandmother just... Mark started. Approve of you? I think so. Victoria looked as surprised as he felt. She hasn't approved of anything I've done since I took over. The auction began, with various luxury items going for astronomical prices. Emma watched with wide eyes as people bid more than Mark's annual salary on watches and wine. Why do they spend so much? She whispered. It's for charity, Victoria explained. The money goes to help sick children. Oh, that's nice then. Even if it seems silly to pay that much for a necklace. When a weekend at a tech camp came up for auction, Emma gasped. That's the camp Dr. Chen told me about, the one where you get to build real robots. Victoria caught Mark's eye, a question in her gaze. He shook his head slightly. The bidding started at $5,000. But Emma wasn't focused on the price. She was watching a little boy at another table, his face falling as the bids climbed higher and higher. He wore leg braces and sat in a specialized wheelchair. He really wants it, Emma observed. Look how sad he is. The boy's parents leaned down, clearly explaining why they couldn't bid. His shoulders slumped in defeat. Emma tugged on Victoria's dress. Can you buy it for him? Emma, Mark warned. That's not... Please? Emma looked between them. He wants to build robots just like me. But his legs don't work right, so maybe robots are extra special to him. Victoria studied Emma for a long moment. Then, without a word, she raised her paddle. The bidding war that followed was fierce. Richard Hartwell himself seemed determined to win, smirking at Victoria each time he raised. But Victoria was relentless, finally securing the camp spot for $15,000. Lot sold to Miss Blackwood, the auctioneer announced. Victoria immediately rose and walked to the boy's table. Mark couldn't hear the conversation, but he saw the child's face transform with joy, his parents' shocked gratitude, Victoria's gentle smile as she knelt by the wheelchair. That was nice of her, Emma said matter-of-factly. Now he can build robots too. When Victoria returned, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. His name is Timothy. He wants to design prosthetics that work better than his current braces. So you gave him a chance, Emma said, just like you gave me a chance with the STEM program. How did you know? Victoria asked. About the sponsorship? Emma smiled. I'm 6, not stupid. Plus, you got the same look when you watched me in class that you had watching Timothy. What look? The one that says you're remembering being a kid who wanted something really badly. Victoria stared at Emma, then laughed, a real, unguarded sound that drew stares from nearby tables. You're terrifying, you know that? Daddy says I'm perceptive. That's like being detective, but for feelings. The evening continued with dinner and dancing. Mark found himself relaxing, especially when Emma charmed everyone at their table with her questions and observations. Even the initially snobbish table-mates seemed won over by her genuine curiosity about their lives and work. As the band played, Emma yawned widely. "Daddy, I'm tired." "We should go," Mark said to Victoria. "It's way past her bedtime." "Wait," Victoria said. "One dance?" "Emma, would you mind if I borrowed your father?" Emma's eyes lit up. "Only if you dance good. Daddy's feet shouldn't be stepped on." Victoria laughed. "I'll do my best." On the dance floor, Victoria placed one hand on Mark's shoulder, the other in his. They swayed to the music, and Mark was acutely aware of how different this was from their usual interactions. "Thank you," Victoria said softly, "for coming tonight, for bringing Emma, for everything." "You paid $15,000 for a stranger's child," Mark pointed out. "I think you're the one who deserves thanks." "Emma asked me to. How could I say no to her? Most people manage it fine. That camp spot could have funded a lot of other things." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "When I was Timothy's age, all I wanted was to attend a computer camp. My mother promised we'd find a way, but then she died. My father said camps were frivolous. I never got to go." "So you made sure Timothy could?" "Emma made sure. I just provided the funds." She looked over at where Emma had curled up in a chair, fighting sleep. "She has such a pure heart. How do you protect that in a world like this?" "You don't protect it," Mark said. "You nurture it. You let her see the hard parts, but also show her how to respond with kindness. Like you did tonight." "I'm not kind," Victoria protested. "I'm selfish and cold and—" "You're human," Mark interrupted. "Complicated and flawed and trying, that's all any of us can be." The song ended, but Victoria didn't pull away immediately. "Mark, I need to tell you something. The board is planning another vote. They want to remove me as CEO. Richard's family is backing a hostile takeover." "When?" "Next month. Maybe sooner." She finally stepped back. "I wanted you to know in case things change. Your job is safe, I've made sure of that. But I might not be around the office much longer. Victoria, I should get you both home. Henry's waiting outside." The ride home was quiet. Emma slept against Mark's shoulder while Victoria stared out at the city lights. As they pulled up to Mark's building, Victoria helped carry a drowsy Emma inside. "Pretty dress," Emma mumbled as Victoria tucked a blanket around her in the car. "Pretty heart too. Don't let the mean people take it away." Victoria's composure cracked. She pressed a kiss to Emma's forehead, then fled to the elevator before Mark could see her tears. But he'd seen them, just as he'd seen the woman behind the CEO facade all evening. Generous, vulnerable, trying so hard to do right in a world that rewarded wrong. As he carried Emma up to their apartment, she stirred. "Daddy? Is Ms. Victoria going to be okay?" "I don't know, sweetheart. We have to help her. Charlotte always helps her friends. Sometimes grown-up problems are too big for—" "No," Emma interrupted with surprising firmness. "Love is never too small. Ms. Wilson taught us that. Even tiny spiders can make big webs." Mark tucked his daughter into bed, marveling at her wisdom. Maybe she was right. Maybe love, in the form of friendship, of chosen family, of simple human connection, could stand against corporate greed and hostile takeovers. He thought about Victoria dancing in his arms, about the joy on Timothy's face, about Eleanor Blackwood's approving nod. Small moments perhaps, but Emma was right about spiderwebs. The strongest structures were built one thread at a time. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. "Thank you for making tonight bearable. Tell Emma she was the belle of the ball. And Mark, I'm glad you came. V." He smiled, typing back. "Emma says to remember that even tiny spiders can make big webs. We're here if you need us." 3 dots appeared, showing she was typing. They disappeared, reappeared, disappeared again. Finally, I'm beginning to believe that. Good night, Mark. As he prepared for bed, Mark thought about the evening, the glittering gala, the cruel whispers, the unexpected kindnesses. Victoria Blackwood was fighting for more than just her company. She was fighting for her soul, for the right to be more than her father's daughter. And somehow, a janitor and his 6-year-old daughter had become her allies in that fight. It shouldn't make sense, but as Emma would say, the best things rarely did. The best? The moon hung over Queens, the same moon that shone on the Rainbow Room in Timothy's house and wherever Victoria was now. They were all under the same sky, connected by threads of kindness and hope. Maybe that was enough. Maybe, just maybe, it could be everything. The call came at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, exactly 1 month after the gala. Mark fumbled for his phone, heart racing at the late hour. Mark? Victoria's voice was barely a whisper. I'm sorry to call so late. I'm at the office. Could you come? Bring Emma. What's wrong? Everything. Her voice cracked. The board met an emergency session. They've given me until morning to resign voluntarily or face a public removal. I need to see friends. Real friends. Mark was already getting dressed. We'll be there in 30 minutes. Emma, remarkably, didn't complain when he woke her. She seemed to sense the urgency, quickly pulling on clothes and grabbing her backpack of books. Is Miss Victoria in trouble? She asked in the taxi. Yes, baby, big trouble. Emma nodded solemnly. Then we help. That's what family does. The word family hung between them, unexamined but true. They found Victoria in her office, still in the clothes she'd worn to the board meeting. Papers were scattered everywhere, financial records, employee testimonials, 5 years of her life's work spread across every surface. You came, she said as if surprised. Of course we came, Emma said, marching over to hug her. You're sad and scared. Nobody should be sad and scared alone. Victoria held Emma tightly, her professional armor completely gone. They won. Richard's family convinced enough shareholders. Said I'm too young, too emotional, too focused on people instead of profits. Focusing on people is good, Emma insisted. That's why everybody likes you better than the mean board people. Everybody doesn't have voting shares, Victoria said bitterly. Mark surveyed the chaos. What are you looking for? I don't know, something, anything. My father left documents, private ones. I've been going through them trying to understand why he built the company this way, why he... She trailed off, gesturing helplessly. Can we help? Emma asked. Victoria smiled sadly. I don't think so, sweetheart, but thank you for... Wait. Emma had wandered to a shelf of old books, her head tilted. This one's different. She pointed to a leather journal, identical to dozens of others on the shelf. It smells older. And look, the dust pattern's wrong. Victoria pulled the journal down, and a sealed envelope fell out. Her name was written across it in her father's handwriting. With shaking hands, she opened it. My dearest Victoria, she read aloud. If you're reading this, then I've failed you as I failed your mother. By the time you find this, I'll likely be gone, and you'll be fighting battles I created but never had the courage to fight myself. Victoria sank into a chair. Mark took Emma's hand, but she pulled free, moving to stand beside Victoria. Keep reading, Emma encouraged softly. Victoria continued, her voice growing stronger. I built this company on ambition and greed, thinking success would fill the hole your mother's death left behind. It didn't. It only made me colder, harder, less like the man she loved. The board members I chose reflect the worst of what I became. But you, my daughter, have your mother's heart. I see it every time you fight for others, every time you choose compassion over profit. I was too proud and too afraid to say it while alive, but I say it now. You are the CEO this company needs, not because of your name, but because of your heart. Tears streamed down Victoria's face as she read the next part. In the safe behind your mother's portrait, you'll find documents that will help. Voting shares I kept hidden, meant for you when you were ready to fight for what's right. The board doesn't know they exist. Use them wisely. Use them to build the company your mother would have wanted. And Victoria, forgive me. I love you. I've always loved you. I just forgot how to show it. Dad. The office fell silent except for Victoria's quiet sobs. Emma climbed into her lap, hugging her tightly. "He loved you," Emma said simply. "He just got lost. But he left you a map to find your way." Victoria looked at Mark over Emma's head. "The portrait's at the family estate. I haven't been there since he died." "Then we go there," Mark said. "It's 4 a.m. "And you have until morning to save your company," he interrupted. "We go now." The drive to the Blackwood estate on Long Island took an hour. Emma slept in the back seat while Victoria stared out the window, clutching her father's letter. "I hated him," she whispered, "for choosing the company over me, for dying before we could reconcile, for making me fight so hard for everything." "But he saw you," Mark offered. "In the end, he saw who you really are. Too little, too late? Maybe. Or maybe just in time." The estate was a massive Tudor-style mansion, dark and imposing in the pre-dawn light. Victoria led them through rooms covered in dust sheets to a study where her mother's portrait hung, a beautiful woman with Victoria's eyes and a gentle smile. "I haven't looked at her in years," Victoria admitted. "It hurt too much." "She's pretty," Emma said sleepily. "She has kind eyes like you." Victoria's hands trembled as she revealed the safe behind the portrait. Inside were stacks of documents, and on top, another letter. This one in her mother's handwriting. "My darling girl," Victoria read, her voice breaking. "Your father promised to give this to you on your 18th birthday, but I know my husband. He'll lock it away with his emotions and forget that love matters more than legacy. So I write this hoping that someday when you need it most, you'll find these words." She had to stop, overwhelmed. Emma took her hand and Mark placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "You are not your father's daughter," Victoria continued. "You are mine. You have my heart, my compassion, my strength. Don't let the world tell you these are weaknesses. They are your greatest powers. Build something beautiful, my love. Build it for the people, not the profits. Build it so that every employee feels valued, every child has opportunities, every family thrives. Build the world we dreamed of when you were small and anything seemed possible. I love you forever, my brightest star." "Mom." "She knew," Victoria whispered. "She knew I'd need this. She knew I'd be here fighting this fight." "Mothers always know," Emma said sagely, "even when they're in heaven." Victoria pulled out the share certificates, enough to give her controlling interest when combined with her existing holdings. Her father had been secretly buying them back for years, keeping them from the board's knowledge. "This changes everything," she breathed. Then her phone rang. "Richard," she said, looking at the caller ID. "Probably calling to gloat." "Answer it," Mark suggested. "But put him on speaker." "Victoria," Richard's smooth voice filled the room. "I hope you've come to your senses. The board meeting is at 8. Resign gracefully and we'll ensure you keep your dignity. And if I don't, then we'll destroy you, publicly. The media already has the story. Emotional female CEO tanks company with bleeding heart policies. Your father's legacy will be forever tainted by your failure." Emma suddenly grabbed the phone. "Mr. Mean Man, this is Emma. You're being a bully and bullies always lose in the end. Ms. Victoria's gonna win because she has love and we have proof and you're just mad because nobody likes you." She handed the phone back to a stunned Victoria. "What proof?" Richard's voice had lost some of its smugness. Victoria found her steel. "The kind that comes with voting shares you didn't know existed. See you at 8, Richard. Oh, and Emma's right. You really are a mean man." She hung up, then burst into slightly hysterical laughter. "Did that just happen?" "Emma Stevens, corporate negotiator," Mark said proudly. "I don't like bullies," Emma said simply. "And he was being mean to our friend." "Our friend." The words settled around them like a warm blanket. The sun was rising as they drove back to the city. Victoria had called her lawyer, who was preparing the share documentation. The morning board meeting that was supposed to be her execution would become her coronation. "I couldn't have done this without you," Victoria said. "Either of you." "Emma, how did you know which journal was different?" Emma shrugged. I notice things, like how you smile different when you're really happy versus pretend happy, or how Daddy looks at you when he thinks nobody's watching. Mark felt heat rise to his cheeks. Victoria glanced at him, something new in her eyes. "And how do I look at him?" she asked Emma. "Like you're surprised. Like you didn't know people could be nice without wanting something," Emma said matter-of-factly. "But that's silly. Lots of people are nice just because." "Not in my world," Victoria said softly. "Then maybe you need a new world," Emma suggested. "Or maybe make your world bigger. Include more nice people." They reached Blackwood Industries as employees were arriving for the day. Word had somehow spread, maybe Richard's premature gloating, and a small crowd had gathered. "Ms. Blackwood," someone called out. "Is it true? Are they forcing you out?" Victoria stood straighter. "They're trying, but I'm not going anywhere." A cheer went up from the crowd. These were her people, the ones who'd benefited from her policies, who'd seen their lives improve under her leadership. "We support you," a woman holding a baby called out. "The daycare changed our lives. The mental health program saved my marriage," a man added. More voices joined in, sharing stories of how Victoria's compassion project had helped them. Emma tugged on Mark's sleeve. "Look, Daddy. She's crying, but good crying." Victoria was indeed crying as she heard how her policies had mattered. Mark watched her absorb the support, watched her spine straighten and her chin lift. "Thank you," she called out. "All of you. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a board meeting to attend." The crowd parted as she strode toward the building, Mark and Emma beside her. In the elevator, she looked at them both. "I want you with me," she said. "Both of you, is that okay?" "We're not board members," Mark pointed out. "No, you're family." The word hung in the air, acknowledged at last. "My chosen family. And I want them to see who I'm fighting for." The boardroom was already full when they arrived. Richard's smug expression faltered when he saw Victoria's confident stride. "This is highly irregular," the red-faced man from before blustered. "These people have no business." "These people," Victoria interrupted, "are why I do business. Mark Stevens, who works nights to support his daughter alone, who deserves dignity and respect and a living wage. Emma Stevens, brilliant and kind, who deserves every opportunity to reach her potential. They represent thousands of employees and their families who make this company run." She pulled out the share certificates. "But if you need a more traditional reason for them to be here, I'm appointing Mark to the board as a representative of employee interests. My controlling shares allow me to do that." "Those aren't real," Richard said desperately. "You're bluffing." Victoria's lawyer entered with a team of clerks. "All authenticated and verified, Mr. Hartwell. Ms. Blackwood owns 51% of voting shares as of this morning." The boardroom erupted in chaos. Richard's face went from red to white to red again. The older woman from the gala, one of the few who'd shown kindness, actually smiled. "Well played, Victoria," she said. "Your mother would be proud." "Yes," Victoria said softly. "I think she would." The vote, when it came, was a formality. Victoria retained her position as CEO with expanded powers to implement her vision. Several board members resigned on the spot, including Richard, who stormed out muttering about lawyers. When the room cleared, only Victoria, Mark, and Emma remained. Emma had been quietly drawing during the entire meeting, and now she presented her picture to Victoria. It showed 3 figures standing together, surrounded by a web that connected them to many other smaller figures. At the top, she'd written, "How Companies Should Work," by Emma Stevens, age 6 and 3/4. "It's beautiful," Victoria said, her voice thick with emotion. "It's us," Emma explained, "and all the people we help. See? The web connects everyone. That's how you make things strong. Lots of connections, not just money." Victoria pulled Emma into a hug, then held out her hand to Mark. He took it, completing their little circle. "I have a confession," Victoria said. "That first night when I found you and Emma in my office, I wasn't there by accident. I'd been watching the security feeds. I was so lonely, and I saw you talking to her while you worked, saw how much you loved her, and I wanted to know what that felt like. To have someone who loved you just for being you. You have that now, Emma said simply. We love you, Miss Victoria, right, Daddy? Mark met Victoria's eyes. So much had changed since that night. The Ice Queen had melted, revealing a woman of warmth and strength and vulnerability. Somewhere between board meetings and butterfly gardens, between galas and late-night conversations, she'd become essential to their lives. Right, he agreed softly. We do. Victoria's smile could have lit the entire building. I love you too, both of you. You saved me. No, Emma corrected. We saved each other. That's what family does. 6 months later, the headline in the New York Times read, Blackwood Industries posts record profits while leading in employee satisfaction. The article featured a photo of Victoria at a company picnic, laughing as Emma showed her a spider web in the garden. Mark had officially joined the company's community liaison department, bridging the gap between executives and employees. Emma was thriving in her programs, her natural gifts nurtured by the best education Victoria could provide, and more importantly, by the love of 2 parental figures who adored her. Victoria had moved from her sterile penthouse to a brownstone near Mark and Emma's apartment. Sunday dinners became a tradition, as did bedtime stories where Victoria and Mark took turns reading to Emma. Daddy? Emma asked one evening as Victoria helped tuck her in. Are you going to marry Ms. Victoria? The adults exchanged glances over her head. Would that be okay with you? Mark asked carefully. Emma considered this seriously. Well, she already feels like my other mom, and you smile all goofy when you look at her, and she keeps leaving her stuff at our apartment anyway. Very practical considerations, Victoria said, fighting a smile. Plus, Emma added, Charlotte's web was strongest when all the threads came together. We're stronger together too. Mark took Victoria's hand. They'd been dancing around their feelings for months, held back by the differences in their worlds, by fear of complicating Emma's life, by 1,000 rational reasons that melted away in the face of a 6-year-old's wisdom. What do you think? He asked Victoria. Want to make this web permanent? Victoria's answer was in her kiss, in the tears of joy on her cheeks, in the way she held both Mark and Emma like they were her entire world. Which, as it turned out, they were. The wedding was small, held in the Butterfly Conservatory where they'd first truly connected. Emma served as ring-bearer and flower girl and self-appointed speaker, informing the gathered friends and family that love is the strongest web of all, and today we're making ours official. Eleanor Blackwood, Victoria's grandmother, sat in the front row dabbing at her eyes. About time, she declared to anyone who'd listen. That child has more sense than the entire board combined. As they exchanged vows, Victoria's voice broke only once, when she promised to love and cherish not just Mark, but Emma too. To be the mother her heart had already claimed her to be. I was lost, she said, looking between them, trapped in a tower of my own making. But you both showed me that love doesn't make you weak. It makes you invincible. You are my heart, my home, my everything. Mark's vows were simpler but no less heartfelt. You gave us hope when we had none. You showed us that families come in all forms, that love multiplies when shared. Emma and I were complete before you, but with you, we're whole. And I, Emma piped up, making everyone laugh, promised to keep teaching both of you about spiders and feelings and important stuff like that. As they walked back down the aisle as a family, butterflies dancing around them in the conservatory's controlled climate, Mark thought about that first night. How a desperate decision to bring his daughter to work had led to this moment. Daddy, Emma whispered, we did it. We saved the princess from the tower. Actually, Victoria said, overhearing, I think the princess saved herself. She just needed a little help from her friends. Even better, Emma decided. That's a much better story. And it was. A story of loss and hope, of bridges built across impossible divides, of a little girl whose wisdom saw through corporate armor to the heart beneath. A story of how love, like spider silk, could be invisible and still be the strongest force in the world. The headlines would write themselves, CEO finds love with single father, or, from janitor to board member, a corporate fairy tale. But the real story was simpler and more complex than any headline could capture. It was the story of three people who chose each other, who built a family from scratch, who proved that sometimes the best things come from the most unexpected places. As they drove away from the conservatory, Emma asleep between them in the car, Victoria laced her fingers through Mark's. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For bringing your daughter to work that night. For not running when I was difficult. For seeing me when I couldn't see myself." "Thank Emma," Mark said. "She's the one who knew you needed us." "My little Charlotte," Victoria murmured, stroking Emma's hair. "Spinning webs of love wherever she goes." And in the end, that's what it was. A web of connection, delicate but unbreakable, woven by a 6-year-old girl who understood that love was the answer to every important question. The city lights sparkled around them as they headed home, not to separate apartments, but to their brownstone, their life, their ever after. It wasn't a fairy tale, not exactly. It was better, it was real.